Pina, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me at your new offices. They look spectacular.
Thank you very much.
It's been about a year now that you're here?
Actually, our second year, and these offices were built for the Missing Children's Network by one of our longtime and very generous partners, the Montoni Group.
Yeah.
They were actually renovating this office, and we were looking to renew our lease. And one of the wife of the owner is a board member, and she says, well, before you renew the lease, Pina, there's an opportunity for the organization to maybe move into one of our buildings that we are renovating. And so they built this space for us, and they're actually subsidizing a very large part of our rent. So it's one of the most generous gifts that we've received in our history.
No, good for them.
Yeah.
Well, they look spectacular, and this whole area here is gonna get revamped, with the university coming. And
that's right.
I remember growing up just down the street on Delepi. Between Beaumont and Jean Talon, that's where I grew up, and this whole area here was just so industrial and so dark. We were afraid to come here and play.
Well, now you see we have the metro station, so it's very accessible for...
The metro existed, but still the area was just so dark and gloomy all the time, and it was just so industrial, and our parents were afraid of us even biking on Beaumont.
I'm sure. Well, now it's really, like you see, really revamped. The university should be opening in September. We have a nice restaurant opening right next door.
Oh, yeah?
Le Beaumont, yes. So that's the owner of Le Toquet. And so they're setting up shop. It should be opening in the next few weeks. And like I said, it's very accessible. We're very close to our clientele this way as well. It's easy to get downtown. It's very
central.
Absolutely. So we really, really enjoy this area. It's just very residential. It's a lot of families with young children.
I was talking with some friends, and there's a lot of them coming back to Montreal. The accessibility is just so important. I understand totally what you're saying. I got to be honest with you, from all the organization, and I want to be careful with how I say this because I don't want it to come out mean or anything like that. But, over the last 11 years, throughout all the organizations and the leaders of the organizations that I had the privilege of working with, I think your organization is amongst the ones that I always felt that we should not need to have this organization.
I so agree with you. The Missing Children's Network was founded following the kidnapping of a little 4-year-old boy from Montreal. Yeah. He was playing in front of his house with another buddy when this man just drove up, and he'd filled the front seat of his car with a mountain of lollipops and all of that. And he invited the young boys into his car, and a 4-year-old Maurice was seduced, if I can say, looking at all those candies, and he just wanted to climb in, get a handful, and be on his way. And unfortunately, his little body was found a few days later by Montreal police, and he lived the worst abuse possible, and was murdered. And it really moved these two women from Montreal to take action. I think there's nothing more precious than the well-being of our children.
For sure.
And, I think anyone who has young children in their lives, we value just how precious they are. We value their innocence, and we want to keep them innocent and being spontaneous in life, Unfortunately, our organization helps when parents are really faced with the worst nightmare possible. And I've been with the network for almost 25 years, and to this day, I cannot really imagine a worse tragedy than not knowing where your child is and will you ever see your child again.
For sure.
And I would like to be out of business for the right reasons, which means, we've built that safe world. There are no more missing children, and all our kids are safe. But until that day happens, the need for this organization will continue.
Absolutely. And it's very valuable, the work that you do. But before, because I want to, we're going to discuss a lot of the things that you do. And of course, I know you guys very personally because I had the pleasure of working with you. But I was looking at, I was just doing some background work, and I saw a little bit of your profile. And you come from education. So how does someone go from, running a daycare to running this sort of
I
organization?
think it's just circumstances. I am a daycare educator.
Yeah.
I was a teacher for 5 years. I ran 2 daycare centers for almost 13 years after that. I taught also adult education at Cégep Marie-Victorin on the English side. I was teaching early childhood. I had 2 courses for almost like 3 years, I would say. And I think at one point I just needed a new challenge, but I knew that I always wanted to be working on behalf of children and on behalf of families. And one of my former colleagues was the sister of one of the founders. Susan Armstrong and Marcella Marsh started this organization. Mabin was Susan's sister, and she also ran a daycare center for a number of years. And then she joined the Missing Children's Network as their director of prevention. And we met for coffee at one point, and she was telling me how much this organization had grown and that her sister needed help in fundraising, and they were now looking to launch prevention and education program for students, but also for parents. And of course, that clicked right away, and I said, this is something I think I would really enjoy doing. So I was first hired as their director of development. I helped out with the fundraising, securing partnerships, and then playing a role in setting up the prevention program. So I was able to do some of the seminars for parents, and I mean that's what gets me going. It's that passion that passion for children, for children to really live a happy childhood, to be able to develop to their full potential, just the way I was able to do. I'm from an Italian background as well. My parents immigrated in 1952. They had to leave Italy after the war, like a lot of immigrants did, They left their countries. They didn't know the language. They didn't know the culture, but they worked really, really hard. They wanted to give us a better life. So, I didn't grow up with all the brand names, accessories, and fashion.
Neither did I, don't worry.
But we had everything. My mom was at home, took care of us, cooked our meals, picked us up from school. We were able to let her know right away what was going on, and that's how I want children to grow up too, knowing that people care about them and not fear going to play in the front yard because someone will drive up and invite you to take some candies, and you'll be separated or snatched from your family and your community for forever. Like that, I cannot fathom. And so I just transitioned my skills. And but when I got to this, all I wanted to do was really prevent children. But obviously, for a lot of community organizations, without the funding, we can't realize these programs. We can't create pedagogical tools. For example, it's difficult to animate the workshops, create the workshops, offer them. So at one point, the fundraising just took a lot of my time, and I had to kind of take a step back from education, but anytime there was an opportunity to create a tool, design a program, that got my juices going. And even now as Director General, my passion remains just making this little corner of the world a much smarter, much safer place for our kids, just building stronger communities for everyone.
For sure. Now, for those listening that are from Quebec and they're maybe more familiar with the French name, it's Les Réseaux Enfants Retour, and I think people know it a lot more under the French name. Just before we go on, tell me a little bit about the organization. What is the Missing Children's Network? So
the Missing Children's Network was founded back in 1985, as I mentioned, following the abduction and murder of 4-year-old Maurice Vienne. Our mission is to support parents whose child is missing. We intervene in every type of disappearance, whether the child has been kidnapped by a stranger, taken to another country by one of the parents, or whose child has run away. And we also intervene in cases where the disappearance just seems to be very mysterious, and I can think of Ariel Kouakou. To this day, we are not quite sure. Did he accidentally fall in the river on the morning of the March 12th, 2018, or was he kidnapped? So we provide emotional support to the families, crisis intervention. And we work very closely with law enforcement. So we produce, circulate the search notices for the children. Now we use a lot of social media. So in real time, we can notify an entire community that we're on the lookout for a child whose life we fear. We do all the support work that comes from sending out the search notices, for example. So if we receive any information, any tips, we will record them and then pass them on to police. So we are not investigators here. We don't duplicate the work of police. That's their job. They're specialized. Our job is to do perhaps what police is unable to do because of their mandates, and also because we're a nonprofit organization. So we, have a little bit more flexibility. We can really think outside of the box, and we can work with partners that can create opportunities so that we can rapidly find missing children. And to prevent kids from going missing, we've also developed a comprehensive prevention and education program that's tailored for very young children, preteens, teens, also for adults, so for the parents, educators, and law enforcement as well. So for over 34 years, we've really been dedicated to the search for missing children, reuniting families, and to the prevention of their abductions, aggression, and exploitation.
I want to talk a little bit more about prevention a little bit later, but I was always curious, how is the organization structured over here? I mean, you have people obviously that manage the different cases. When something happens, when there's a new alert coming out, I mean, is everyone, is it like an all hands on deck kind of thing? We leave the previous cases kind of in the back burner and you have everyone focused on one thing, or how does it work?
Okay, well, it's a very good question. Right now, we are a team of 8 professionals. I have 2 case managers, Patrick and Nancy, that intervene in all our cases involving missing children. So they're the ones who will take all the calls from parents, try to reassure them, try to answer their questions, provide information, or try to just get additional information that can help us locate missing children. They're also the ones that will communicate with law enforcement, because it's important to share the information, get the updates so that we can target the search as well. And do all the necessary follow-ups, producing the poster, getting it up on social media, for example. I also have 2 educators that are in the school, so their job is really to meet with groups of students and empower them with the knowledge and the skills. The rest are support staff that either do fundraising, the accounting, for example, or take care of our communications. Whenever there's a high critical case, for example, Ariel, we have an Amber Alert, for example, those are days where just we do, even if we're in the middle of a fundraising campaign, that takes absolutely. That's put on the back burner. The goal is to get the information, to disseminate the information as soon as possible, so that we can find the child as soon as possible, take care of the family, and just make sure that all the proper steps have been taken that will allow us to recover the missing child. But there could be days also where we're working on, because the Amber Alert, for example, has been launched, and I think everyone is familiar with the Amber Alert. It's used in high critical cases where we really fear for the child's physical or mental health, for example. But that could be a day also where we might get a tip regarding another case. Well, you still have to take that tip. It's very important because it can lead to recovering that missing child, or a parent who's having a very difficult day because they've heard that there's another child that's missing. We still have to take the time to try to reassure them, letting them know where they're at with where we are at with their case right now, and what we can do as well, And sometimes some of these parents will ask if they can be put in touch with the current family, just in case they just need to talk with someone, because they now know. These families know what that family is now going through, and they can be each other's support.
And I assume that things may vary depending on gender or age. I mean, do you work differently? For example, if it's like an 8-year-old kid versus an 80-year-old person that may have some health-related issues?
I would say that most of the cases we deal with have to be children, so 18 years and younger. We're Missing Children's Network. We do have some adult cases, some young adults before the age of 25, I would say, And definitely the way we work is differently depending on the disappearance. vulnerable children. So that for us, it's kids under the age of 13. We're not quite sure, did they run away? We're not quite sure what the circumstances are. For us, we consider that child's life could be at risk. They're not able to make the proper decisions. They can't really take care of themselves. So those cases will be dealt with in a more urgent manner. And it will be, we'll work very closely with law enforcement as well, sharing out that information. And also, we will enlist the help of the media and different partners as well. So the more information we have about a child, the better we can target the search. For example, a child that we know likes to hang out at the cinema or loves to take the metro. So we'll work with the Société de Transport de Montréal to get the information out to all the workers within the metro system, for example, just to be on the lookout. With teens, it's very different as well, depending on their age and, again, depending on their circumstances. Is it the first time they're running away? Are they hanging out with the wrong people, for example? Is there any indication that the kids may be involved with sexual exploitation, drugs, alcohol, etc.? So those we're going to handle with a little bit more white gloves, I would say. So we obviously will not broadcast the photograph, the same way we would if an Ariel goes missing, a Cédrica Provencher goes missing, only to protect the integrity of the youth. And we're going to be very careful as to what information we will share with the public, because we also have to keep in mind that these teens will eventually be found. They will return back to their families, back to their communities. So we have to evaluate, do we need to say that this teen has problems with mental health issues, this teen tried to commit suicide, or this teen is hanging out with questionable group of people, or may be involved in sexual exploitation. So anything that can damage the reputation of the teen, we're going to be very careful with what information we're going to give out. And again, we're going to try to get as much information as possible, the hangouts, that the kid, what are their interests, their hobbies, any problems that they may have been encountering before running away, for example. So all this information allows us to work with sometimes specific partners that can help us recover these kids. And sometimes these kids can be outside of Quebec. So we will work with the Canadian Centre for Child Protection that's based in Winnipeg. So they have different partners in different provinces throughout Canada. So we will enlist their help to get the information out. And kids that are taken out of the country by one of the parents, that's commonly we call them the parental abduction. That too often we will not put out a search notice. In many cases, we have an idea which country the child may have been brought.
So what happens in these cases? Is this the bulk of your the files? I remember once you were telling me that the biggest number of files that you have to manage are mostly related to parents.
Yes, in terms of kidnapping, parental abductions is the most common form of abduction. People often think it's a criminal abduction, only because these type of abductions receive so much media attention. Usually the Amber Alert will be launched, and we know that time is our worst enemy, so we really, every second counts. We need to get the information out.
And this is within Canada, or it's U.S., Europe?
It's international. Yeah, it's international that criminal abductions will get the most attention, but they represent less than 1% of all the cases that we deal with, except we can agree, one Ariel is already one too many, one Cédrica should never be. Yeah. So I think we can all agree that just one missing child is already one too many in our province and across Canada as well. For our offices, the runaways account for the majority of the cases that we deal with. Up to 90% of the cases that we are asked to help out involve youth between the ages of 12 to 17 that have either run away from home or from a group.
And I don't know if it's a new thing, but the last couple of years, it's been getting a lot of media attention. These, these young teenage, mostly girls, running away. And I got to tell you, as a father of two girls, every time that alert goes off,
it's very scary.
I think my heart skips a beat.
Absolutely.
I mean, I don't know if it's a new thing or if it's something that we're witnessing more and more, like the last 2-3 years. I mean, that's when I started noticing it. It's incredible to see that these young girls just, and I don't know if most of them are in youth centers already, because there's been cases of girls disappearing
Yes.
from youth centers. But there's other cases where they just left the house to go to
Yes.
school and just they never came back. And I mean, I don't know if it's recent or not, but most of these cases are often is it usually linked to kidnapping, or is it more linked to like an organized network, that has perfected luring, troubled teens that come from a fragile background, and like you mentioned, sexual exploitation is involved as well.
Well, teen runaways have always been around, unfortunately, except up until 2016, there was very little attention regarding runaways. Actually, I think probably the public was also desensitized and not really understanding why youth are running away and why they keep running away, for example. And in 2016, we had a couple of parents who used the media in a very brilliant manner to draw attention to the fact that...
How?
Well, because one of the parents worked for a local and well-known newspaper.
Ah, that's right. I remember. Yeah.
And when his 14-year-old daughter, beautiful girl, did well in school and all, but unfortunately, started to frequent questionable individuals that promised her a more glamorous life and so on and so forth. And he put it out on, the dad went on social media asking for help, and the media got involved. And I think for many years, we tried to draw attention to the fact that there was an issue regarding runaway youth, because we'd seen it in our offices. We speak with other organizations across Canada or in North America. Even the police, I will be honest with you, seem to be desensitized because there's so many youths. Just in Quebec, there's over 5,000 reports every year. Any given year, there's 5,000 reports that are signaled to law enforcement. And in the majority of these cases, the kids have run multiple times. So often even the police felt, well, she'll come back. And I have to also say that up to 65% come home within the first hours that they decide to leave the home, okay? And up to 90% will come home within the first few days. So because a lot of them do come home on their own, we had seen that not every law enforcement or every police officer was really taking it seriously. These kids are going to come back. And when they didn't, after 2-3 weeks, then we would get a call. Or they would call the parents and say, did you get any news from your daughter? And no. So then we would get the calls and get involved. But 3 weeks later, you have to ask yourself, where were these kids? Who took care of them? What was asked of them? How did they survive, But in 2016, finally it was like an abscess was broken. And I think, and again, there might have been a lot of... misconception, thinking that a lot of these youths came from broken homes, very dysfunctional families, for example, or were running away, were fleeing situations of abuse, etc. And when these parents came forward in 2016, well, these were French-Canadian girls from some of our biggest cities here, like in Laval, Montreal, girls that came from very good backgrounds, families. Both mom and dad were professionals. And all times we looked at it differently. It wasn't just kids from the cultural groups, etc. And it's like, wow, this is happening in our own backyard. And like I said, the abscess was broken, and we start to hear more about kids running away. And and that gave us the opportunity to explain why kids are running away. And yes, a lot of them do run away from the group homes, and a lot do run away from home. We have what we call our spontaneous runaways and the planned runaways. So the spontaneous are usually those who are still living at home, and they might have had a big blowout with their parents, or something happened at school and they're upset, and so they just walk out, slam the door, and they walk out, and they walk because they left now with no money, none of their possessions, etc. After a few hours, you've been walking, you're tired, you're hungry, you're thirsty. So they either call home or they show up back at home saying, I'm sorry, Mom. But then we have the planned runaways. And usually those are the kids that are fleeing a problem that they think is so insurmountable that no one will understand them. So actually, the running away is a cry for help. They're escaping a situation. But running away is, they realize fast enough, is not really the answer because there's so many predators. And unfortunately, those that prey upon our runaway youth, they know how to read if you're a vulnerable youth, and the fact that when you run away and you don't have money, you don't have, how are you going to live, where you can get your next meal from, you need to change your clothing, you need to sleep.
They offer the fake support kind of thing.
This is it. But when you're looking for attention and affection, you misinterpret that as being a sign of attention and affection. Oh, somebody cares about me.
No, I remember there was a lot of attention, and there was even a series on TV.
Yes.
I didn't watch it because I didn't have the Hartford, but my wife did. It was called Fugueuse.
Yes.
And that brought in, it shed a lot of light. I mean, I don't know how fictional it was, but I remember it was being talked about consistently.
Unfortunately, George, it's the reality for a lot of runaway teens. We have been compiling statistics on runaways for the last 7 years, and the majority are young girls between the ages of 14 and 15, and 1 out of every 3 of these youths will fall victim to exploitation. And we also know, according to the statistics, so these are the cases that we actually handle in our offices, another 30% could have been exposed to sexual exploitation. So the danger is really, really there. This is why prevention education is so crucial. We need to speak to our children about these real dangers, how adults groom them as well, because it's all a grooming. It's a well orchestrated dance where you make them feel good about themselves. You show them a glamorous life, how easy it is to make some quick money. Yeah. You understand? So they're exposed to all of that.
I'm curious to know though that from all these girls that have been involved in these prostitution rings or victims of sexual exploitation, how many of them actually come back and denounce it or explain what's going on, who's behind it? Is that happening, or is it kept secret, or they're afraid?
I think it's a combination of all of that. We don't have actual numbers regarding how many actually do denounce, but I do know that in the last few years, several programs have seen the day. I think of Les Survivantes, which are 2 police officers from Montreal Police, that have actually built a beautiful program where they try to support the victims, so survivors of exploitation, and try to offer them like that a better life, for example, and go around meeting with survivors, but also speaking with groups of students just to sensitize them to the reality. Like, this is not love, there's a different, kids need to identify, for example, what are healthy relationships, whether they're friendships or their first love relationships. As teens, for example, this Projet Mobilis, there are so many different projects that exist today. Not too many of them will denounce, unfortunately, because there's always that fear of reprisals or girls that are the way that they're kept behind by their pimps, predators, boyfriends, we can call them whatever. Some of them are heavily into drugs as well. So the minute the drugs are being withheld, they are in withdrawal. So they will do anything to get that quick fix again. Or they've been threatened into believing that if they do go to police, for example, that some harm will come either to them or to a close family member, a sister, for example. So they're manipulated and they're kept in this world in such a way as well. And again, I'm going to insist on prevention and education. And in 2017, we actually launched a program called Aimer Shine. And Aimer Shine really targets kids from 10 to 13. It's a bilingual program. It's one of its kind in the province. Bilingual program for preteens all across Quebec that can be delivered either in the schools or via an electronic platform that we use called Reacts. And it really teaches children about consent, trusting their instincts, understanding the components of healthy relationships and friendships, setting boundaries, physical, emotional, and virtual, because social media plays a big role in luring kids today. The importance of denouncing, and we also created and it's available on our website, an online directory of programs and services across Quebec for survivors of sexual exploitation and their caregivers.
Have you seen results from this?
Well, we're in the process of evaluating the program, so we should start seeing the first evaluations come up. What I can tell you, George, is that every week when my youth workers come back, every week they share with us stories of young girls, mostly young girls, that come up and will share the fact that they were either abused, either abused or wanted to run away for whatever reason, etc. So we're able to guide them. So the fact that they're able to come up after the workshop and they can trust our educators, and then we can get them the proper help, because we will work with the school to make sure that these kids do not become tomorrow's statistics. That is so important.
How do you cope with so much stress and all that urgency that's associated to your work? Obviously, as soon as an alert goes up, you automatically know that you're going to be dealing with frustration, hopelessness, all this emotional roller coaster coming, from the families. And talking about your youth workers coming and telling you all these stories. I mean, it's such a huge burden to carry. I don't know how you do it.
Well, I think we're a strong team, and we share a lot within the team as well, so we can really support ourselves. And as you noticed, our offices have an open air concept. So right away, we can detect if someone is having a difficult day, for example, and we can provide that support as well. I think when we're in a high emergency situation, I'll be honest, we're on adrenaline. We just stay focused. We know what has to be done, how it needs to be done.
Yeah, but see, that's on the moment.
Yes.
But then after, like you said, you're not involved in all the investigative stuff.
No.
I mean, that's the police case files. They take care of it. But you're on the sidelines. So, I mean, you're constantly in communication with the family. You're communicating with other different partners. You're so much more emotionally involved in this whole procedure that it's very difficult for you to kind of get your mind off it. Well, I mean, you can, because this is your reality. This is what your work is.
But, we have to find what works for us. Whether you walk out and you just go for a walk, for example. I do a bit of yoga as well, I'll speak about it, like to my parents. I'm lucky enough to still have my parents who are very supportive as well. I have other staff members, they have young children. So when they go home, they have to focus on their family as well. I think we do a lot of what we call the self-care as well. We have to remind ourselves that we need to take time for ourselves. And sometimes we do get too close to the situation. We have no choice, in that you want so much for that child to be found, for example, and you feel the parents' pain. And just the way we react, we realize, oh my God, I listened to a song while I was driving home, and I just started to cry. So I know that I now need to take care of myself, and sometimes I'll spend time for myself personally with my niece. I have a 5-year-old niece and an 18-month-old baby nephew. And when I'm with them, I'm just with them.
At peace,
Yes, and they remind me why I'm doing this work as well. And I want that promise of a better tomorrow for them, and we're going to keep fighting for them. And it could sound cliche to say we have to find that balance, but it's not always easy. That I'll be very honest with you. It's not always easy.
And on top of that, I mean, it seems that for certain cases, it just never ends, right? I mean, you must be dealing with files. I mean, what is the longest running file that you're managing?
It's Clifford Sherwood. He went missing back on October 21st, 1954. He was only 9 years old. Clifford was from Verdun, so he was walking to school with one of his friends, and both of them just disappeared from the surface of the earth. we've done a lot of work. I mean, through the years, we worked with John Walsh from America's Most Wanted, and we had Clifford featured in documentaries and a lot of TV shows.
Sorry. So how does that work? Because the organization began in 84, 85.
Yes.
How does that story come on your desk, kind of thing? I mean, is there they lost that much hope that they're like, listen, it's been 30 years already.
Yes. Well, because there was no other organization until the organization was founded, right? So when parents or someone close to a family came to hear that there was a missing children's organization, the parents knocked on our doors. So, I wasn't here when Mrs. Sherwood, Clifford's mom, came to see Susan and Marcel, but I think she came to see us in 1988. He'd just been missing since 1954. And he was 9 years old. So we tried to get all the information, tried to see if there was a police record. And because all those years passed, the first thing we did is we asked the RCMP to produce an age-enhanced photograph of Clifford. And then we worked with the media. The mom was able to give some interviews. And that generated a lot of tips as well. So
did that open the door to other cases that had happened before?
Absolutely. Yeah. The more the organization got known, all at once, parents were coming out saying, I haven't seen my kids in 28 years. My child ran away 4 years ago. So we have a lot of cases. And if you look at our missing children's poster, there are some that date to before the origin of the organization, But we never hesitate to take on a case and to reach out to law enforcement. And today, with social media, people just share. We can see, that no one remains indifferent. And so as soon as we post something, boom, in real time, within minutes, that photograph will get, hundreds of hits and thousands of shares and tens of thousands of views. It's amazing how quickly the word gets around.
I'm thinking about these families, and obviously it's, I'm a father myself, and I can't think of a situation where a family would think of giving up or letting go. But has there ever been a situation where you, for example, personally, or a family that you work with, or different partners that you work with, they seem to kind of lose hope, or they seem to just want to give it up, say, look, we've done everything we could?
Well, we do see that because it is very difficult for parents.
So what's your role in that? I mean, you have to kind of be the foundation, right? You're the tough person here, and you see this. What do? Do you kind of encourage them? Do you want to keep going? I mean, how does it work?
Well, I think first we always just validate what we listen. We just listen, and we listen, we validate where the family is at today, And sometimes we just come to the conclusion that today is really not a good day, but tomorrow might be better. And we try to find something else that we can do that can maybe help us open new doors on this case, right? Because it's very difficult for parents, and especially when the years go by. And as the years go by, there's also less information that tends to come in as well, right? So these families, the best way I can describe is they seem to live like on a roller coaster. So today, they get a call from law enforcement because there's a tip, and that tip seems to be very positive. So they hold on to that maybe their answer is coming. And then when the tip becomes negative, it's like they have to pick themselves up the floor again. So our job is to pick them up and almost like carry them symbolically to make it through the next day as well, To my knowledge, I've never seen a family give up, but I have seen families taking a back step and just say, I don't want to do media right now. Please don't circulate the poster for the time being. If it's a milestone anniversary, they're going to tell us, I don't want to do a special event to remember that day. So we know that this is where they are in their life at this point as well. So we really, it's a personal journey, and we remind each other at the end of the conversation. I can't tell how many conversations we've had with parents where I really feel it's like desperate, It's like, what else can I say to this mom, to this dad? And then as we talk, and then we come back to the present also, how's your daughter? How's Marjorie? How's your dad doing? What are you going to do this weekend? Do you have any plans for Mother's Day?
Yeah.
And it brings them back to the present to remind them that life still goes on.
It must be very tricky for you, especially to draw the line of what needs to be done, because you get so close to the families, and with all the expertise that you have, the knowledge, and the network, the vast network that you've established. Is there a time where you feel like more can be done, but because it's not your
Yes.
your terrain, it's not your field, you don't want to step on anyone's toes. You feel, for example, that the police or the authorities aren't doing more than they should, but meanwhile they are. But because there's this sense of attachment that you've created, you feel like, come on, let's go. There's more.
Well, I think we're the parents' advocates, because we advocate for their child on their behalf, George, And I think on the whole, a lot is being done by law enforcement to recover these children. But sometimes I really believe something else could be done, especially when certain sightings come in, just to go to take that extra step and go that extra mile for that case. Because sometimes we feel like, when is the next good tip going to come in, for example? And what if this is the right tip?
Yeah.
And we don't act on it. And then 3 years later, we find out that, we could have put an end to a case 3 years sooner, for example. And I'll give you an example. It was not one of our cases, but it happened in the States a few years ago involving a young girl called J.C. Dugar, and some people might recognize the name. She'd been missing, I think she was 11 years old when she was literally snatched in front of her house. And she'd been missing for 19 years. And she had been held sequestered in the backyard, this makeshift hut that you can call that the predator had created. And unfortunately, she also gave birth to two of his kids.
My
Imagine
goodness.
he's not only your rapist, but you bore two of his kids. And neighbors would hear, this is in California, so neighbors would hear sounds from the backyard. They would call police, and police would go to the house, but never went further. Had they gone further and saying, but, let's just check the backyard, for example, maybe that girl would have been rescued a long time before, and maybe she would, never have given birth to those kids, for example. And I think she's a wonderful mom, and from what I've heard, she loves her kids, and she's, they're really her kids today. But she could have been spared all this unnecessary grief, and so could have her family and her entire community. Because when children are snatched in such a way, it leaves a void in the community, and people are scared. Is there a predator? Is my child at risk, for example? And we've seen it in cases of kidnapping, like when Cedrica was kidnapped many years ago. I remember the grandfather telling me, Pina, for 3 weeks, the parks were empty in Three Rivers. Parents refused for their kids to go out. It was the middle of summer, weeks before these kids went back to school, and they were barricaded with fear also, in fear, which is really not the way to educate our children either, because what happens then if somebody approaches them? Would they know what to do, for example? Would they know how to get help, where to go for help, and what to say in those situations, Right. So I think our philosophy is you got to do everything that you can with the information that you have, just close a door. You get a sighting. For us, it's opening a door. Then just close this door so that we're not left with doubts many years later, wondering if that could have led us somewhere else, for example.
Yeah. What is your most, has there been, or have there been, if there's more than one, your most disappointing moments? I mean, you've probably seen so many things. I mean, what has been a moment where you were just so devastated, and just and you probably deal with a lot of these things. Obviously, kids showing up deceased probably wouldn't help, but what is that moment that you were really just down, your most disappointing moment?
I think was the first for me, it was the first case that I was asked to work on, even though I was director of development. It was Jolie Campo, who went missing in June of 1995. I'd been here only 9 months. And my role was to coordinate the poster distribution with Laval police, and work with printers, because back then we did things the old-fashioned way, creating the posters and then printing them, and working with the messenger services so that we can send them to all those who wanted to help out with the poster distribution. And I think 4 days into her disappearance, the call came in that her body had been found in a ravine not far from her backyard. And it was just like a devastating moment, because she was only 9 years old. I think she went missing June 8th, June 9th, something like that. She was found days before the end of school year. And I remember in our offices we had volunteers and the staff just preparing the posters, labeling them. And I went out and I had to tell them that law enforcement had called us, and this is the news. And I could see everybody just looking just as crushed, and they just continued to pack, like nobody stopped. It was just they continued to pack. And I remember thinking, why are they still packing and labeling like there's no more need? But it just didn't register because you're in that adrenaline mode. And I remember just wanting to quit. And I remember I went to speak to my director, Susan, and I just said, I can't do this, Susan. I just remember thinking, I came here to save lives, not to lose lives. And she says, I can understand your disappointment, Pina, but she says, we're here to prevent these things from happening. And, unfortunately, sometimes these situations happen. But for me, I think I will never forget that. Jolene Riendo is another file that I'd really, really worked on, again, with coordinating poster distribution, working with the media, giving them information, updates along the way. And then many years later, almost 11 years later, Montreal Police had invited me to just go to the police station one morning, because we were going to meet a family, but they did not tell me which family and why. They just wanted me to be at the major crimes office for 6:00 on May 4th. So I went. I really thought we'd found a child. I really thought that. And 5 minutes before the family arrived, the commander told me, I think we should tell you why, Pina. And we just found the remains of Jolene. The family's coming in. And, that thought of like, oh, my God, in a few seconds, all their hope is dashed. Mm-hmm. There's no more hope. And being in the room while it was announced to the family was, I think, something no matter what profession you have, can never, ever prepare you for...
for getting those news.
And to see and the reaction and of the family, and to this day I can't even put into words what I witnessed that morning. But and you just feel so powerless. Mm-hmm. Just feel so powerless, and you're angry also that another child was lost. Because someone. Tricked her into whatever, into following him to doing something better, whatever, offered her something. And it was like, no, these situations got to stop, I think for me, the worst is is every time we've lost a child, is what could we have done to prevent it? What could we have done to respond even more, faster, so that we would have recovered them sooner? And to be honest, if I say anything else after that, it's when you approach partners and because we have to fund the organization, we don't receive government funding for the operations, and you speak with partners and you're told no for whatever reason. I take it personally.
You want to shake them up?
Yes, I take it personally because this cause has become my baby. It's 25 years, and when I speak with partners, for example, I know that in my heart I carry all these children and all these families, and I know what it means to them, and I know what the expectation, the dreams of my staff are as well. So this is the vision you're selling people, and you're told no. It's like, and...
it's crazy also to just come to terms with that reality that you have to assume that role, right? That there's going to be these very difficult moments.
Yes.
And, I mean, have you, and it's, I don't want to ask you this question because, I mean, you're still human, right? You have the emotions, but I mean, have you come to terms with that reality? Have you, like, I don't want to say lost the emotion, but
Never,
yeah.
never. I can tell you that every time it happens, it feels like it's the first time.
Yeah.
It's something we cannot get used to. All I know is that when it happens, we're in a proactive mode. We know exactly what has to be done. In the steps that have to be taken, and right away like the creativity starts in terms of which other partner can we approach, and I have to say, as much as we see the worst in humanity, I've seen the best in humanity as well. And I think that has been the most rewarding experience for me, and I think for a lot of my staff as well. But I can tell you that nothing ever prepares you for that. You still feel this shock, almost like this disbelief that, oh my God, it happened again, and how can anyone want to hurt a child?
Yeah.
And why? Like, we just can't, and we should never wrap our minds around that as well. And I think it's this emotion behind it that drives us to find the answers or to just keep pushing on behalf of these kids. It's the motivating factor at the end, And every tragedy becomes a motivating factor to want to do more prevention. Because we realize every child that leaves us their life as a legacy, an heritage, we could say, we need to do better. We need to do better.
You spoke a little bit about social media. How has that changed the game for you? Because there's a good side of social media, and there's definitely a bad one, right? I mean, everything happening now, I'm thinking again about the young teenage girls that are leaving. A lot of that has to do with social media, and there's a lot of luring techniques now on social media. But there's also a good side, and you mentioned it. I mean, dispersing the news.
Absolutely.
At the snap of your fingers. I mean,
yes.
Hundreds of thousands of views, and you mobilize a community quicker than ever before.
That's right.
How are you guys juggling with social media?
Well, we try to make the best use of it. So we do use it to vehicle our messages, especially when a child is missing, but also a lot of our prevention messages today. So like you said, in real time, we can really galvanize an entire community to be on the lookout. The Amber Alerts also are on social media today. They're geo-targeted. So, whomever is within 50 to 100 kilometers of the disappearance are the first to be notified. For example, we also have the 24-hour news feed, which is really important because every 15 minutes we can ensure that the information of the missing child circulates. For example, we also see through social media that children are reported missing. And so on the weekends, a teen doesn't come home, for example, we see it on social media. So right away, we can also privately send a message to the family and say, listen, this is what we do, blah, blah, blah. And we could really, support them right away, no matter what time of the day or night that it happens, and put it out on social media as well. So those are all like the good things of social media. Unfortunately, there's also the negative aspect, and the negative aspect is kids that don't use social media properly, by not setting their privacy settings, for example, by just being an open book, not knowing necessarily the danger of posting certain information, especially personal information, for example, and how easy it is also for predators to prey upon these kids, because it's easy to get their attention. You send a text every hour, and it can give the teen this false impression that, oh, George really cares about me. I wake up in the morning. Oh, he's the first one. How you doing? Blah blah blah. How was your day at lunchtime? How's it going? And unfortunately, because sometimes these kids communicate with, a week or so, play some of the video games with these people, they think, well, they're not strangers any longer because I know him. No, you don't know him, and it's easier today to win their trust because anyone can pretend to be anyone hiding behind a computer, right? Yeah. Unfortunately. So that part of the social media we see has had some negative impact. And I cannot tell you how many kids have different profiles because they know that their parents will also check. Mm-hmm. And so they set up profiles under different names. And as a parent, you really don't want to see the photographs that are posted, and also who the friends are on those pages, for example. Yeah. It's really, really scary, And again, I'm going to go back to prevention, education for parents as well, because technology is advancing so quickly as well. And, it is possible. We can't keep up with everything, but there's basics, and the basics is, first of all, it's just making your home a place of trust with your children, and being their best champion, and really spending quality time with your kids. If they have problems, trying to find solutions right away, getting your kids involved in different hobbies so that they develop their self-esteem and they learn to belong to the good gangs that we want them to be. So there's a lot of work that can be done from when they're really, really young up until their teens, and just communication is so key today.
Let's talk about prevention. Obviously, it takes up a huge part of what you guys do. Mm-hmm. It occupies a huge space in your operations. Where are we in terms of this sensitization? Is there obviously there's always more that could be done?
Yes.
But where are you at now? I know that you recently created an app.
Yes. Signal. So the app is actually an application for parents. It's our modern child identification booklets that we used to do many years ago, either through McDonald's or Jean Coutu, and the police. We would have one day a year where we would invite the families in these locations, and we would take their photograph, fingerprint them, give them an ID, a booklet. And we made it really festive because it's already a scary subject, especially for parents. So we try to make it as festive and positive as possible. And we've now modernized that platform. So the app is available in English and French, can be downloaded free of charge from the Apple Store or Google. And people can go right on our website and just click on one of those icons, and it leads you into the app. You can take pictures of your child. You complete their physical description, and and it's the one app we hope parents will never have to use. Yeah. But in the event your child gets lost, like in a public place, you're going sugaring off, you're going to the mall, you're going to Granby Zoo, etc. Well, you have everything you need to give to police so that they can start searching for your child, for example. So if in case of an emergency, well, then you just either send it by text, you can send it by email, just by filling in the proper fields. So that's an app that we launched last year, thanks to TELUS, because it's the help of financial partners such as TELUS that allows us to create these new tools that are really fantastic, And again, it's like in real time. You just send it out. The photographs are high quality, depending on your child's age. You determine also, do you want to update the photograph once a year, several times a year? You get a notification. It's time. You have some safety tips. So it's really a precious tool. And we have education programs. So we have our How I Stay Safe. How I Stay Safe are safety workshops for children, kindergarten, cycle 1, cycle 2, so grades 1 up until 4. We also do internet safety with the children, because a lot of children, even though Facebook and a lot of the apps say you need to be 13 years and older, we're noticing that kids very, very young are using these tools. So they need to know how to do it.
Do you have any presence in schools, for example?
Yes, that's how we do our workshops. And our latest Shine Aimé, it's a provincial program, again, made possible thanks to a very generous grant that we received by a private family foundation here in Montreal and the Air Canada Foundation that has also contributed. So these workshops are offered year-round. Schools, day camps, youth groups, so we can go into the YMCA, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, for example. The workshops are anywhere between 30 minutes for the very young ones, all the way to secondary 5. So they're age appropriate. We present the content in a very positive manner. We do a lot of role-playing activities for the children. And then we always leave them a little something that they can review with their parents, so the parents know that we went into the schools. Look, last year we had our best year ever, George. Over 17,000 children were sensitized.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Tell me something, because obviously it's important to communicate this information towards the children. But you mentioned before, the biggest environment and probably the most important one is at home and what happens at home. Do you work at all with families, like parents? Is there a program to sensitize the families and the parents?
Yes, we have seminars for parents as well. So again, and sometimes we go into the schools, daycares, but sometimes neighborhoods have gotten together and we meet at a parent's house, for example, and we will go over how to broach the subject, and concretely at the different ages, what should we be talking to the children about? So we give concrete examples. It's really hands-on, and we also go into the workplace. So we just recently implemented our lunch and learns. So it's easier sometimes to get parents while they're at work, because after day's work, you're
disconnected.
Yeah, and you're running to pick them up at daycare, at school. And you got to do supper, prepare supper, homework, and who wants to go back to school after that? It's very hard. So we have these lunch and learns, again, that are adapted. So if a group of parents wants to know more about internet safety, we'll talk to them about internet safety, for example. They want to know more about how to prevent runaways or detect signs of exploitation. So we work with these groups on an individual manner to really identify what their individual needs are, and then we build the program around it. They're 45 minutes to 1 hour, again, depending on the availability of the employees. And the goal is to reach as many people as possible. Like you said, you started the show by saying, we should be an organization that should not be around for the, and if we continue to do that, maybe in the near future, sometime in the near future rather, we can say, mission accomplished, right? That's my goal.
I hope so. What are you working on now? Is there anything that we're looking forward to? I mean, I'm not sure exactly when this episode will air. I'm thinking probably close to the summertime, maybe.
Okay.
What are you working on? I know that there's a big race now, but we're in April, so
yes.
I mean, by the time this airs, it'll have happened already. But what's happening from now until the end of the year that?
Well, we're going to be marking International Missing Children's Day on May 25th. For that day, we have dozens of daycares across Quebec that are going to walk 25 minutes in honor of missing children and raise some funds that support the search for missing kids. We have a beautiful Dragon Boat challenge on Sunday, June 9th. So we encourage people to come down the Lachine, the canal, cheer us on, make a donation again in support of our critical mission. On August 8th, we have our annual golf tournament at Hillsdale. And for the first time in our history, we are also planning a fundraising event in Quebec City. It's called A Message in a Bottle. It's a beautiful wine tasting and pairing evening that will allow us to have a stronger presence in Quebec City. And we're going to be running our Halloween campaign called Develop Sweet Reflexes or Bonbon Reflex, where we sell Halloween bags with reflective ink so that our little ones can be seen on Halloween night. So that's a safety awareness campaign, but a fundraiser for the organization as well. And we're going to continue delivering our workshops. So when the school year is completed in June, Right away, we're going to the summer camps throughout the province again. So we're just going to continuing hammering our message. I know a lot of the kids will have seen us. It's just an opportunity to repeat the messages and make sure that they do understand them. And then in September, we're going to continue with especially promoting our Shine. We really realize that there's an urgent need to teach kids about healthy relationships, setting boundaries, denouncing inappropriate behavior, knowing who you can speak to in those situations as well, and reinforcing that no means no. It's not a negotiable. No means no.
What is the possibility of having that program actually inserted in the curriculum of our schools?
I think it could be a little bit challenging because right now the schools are met with so many other challenges as well. You know, there's. I know we spoke with someone at the ministry, and that's of education, and he was saying, we're trying to do drug prevention, cannabis prevention right now, mental health issues, for example, all the transgender, LGBTQ, and he says, there are so many great programs, but if we inserted each one in the curriculum, we would never get through the rest of the curriculum. So we need to reach kids through different medium as well. That's why we work with a lot of the youth serving groups. We've been into some of the group homes that are led by Batshaw. We'll go to the YMCAs, the Big Brothers, Big Sisters, etc. So we're just trying to, les maisons de jeunes. We've done a lot of interventions in les maisons de jeunes. So we just sometimes, if a school tells us, listen, we've maxed out guest speakers for this year. So then we say, okay, in this community, who else can we work with? And other community groups like La Maison d'Haïti that is not far from our offices as well. So we any opportunity to meet with the kids and leave them with tools that can help them, because you never know which kid is in trouble or just didn't know that these were his or her rights, for example, and you leave them with something that can change their life in a positive manner and not become another victim or another statistic, or just how many kids are just committing suicide, like that's their only way out. And I can't even imagine that, like for someone to feel so young that it's just so hopeless that they're doomed.
Yeah.
It's unfathomable.
Pina, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know you're very busy. I've always loved the work that you do here.
Thank you.
Good luck with all the future activities, and I know that I'll be seeing you again very soon.
Thank you so much, George. It was a pleasure.
Thanks.